All right. Trey Wingo, thank you so much for joining us on the East West Football Podcast. How are you?
Good, but I think you guys should be called the East Central and West Podcast. If I've got this right, Kendall's in North Carolina. We have Jeremy in Texas, and you're in the Valley in California?
Yeah, Central Valley, but I represent the whole West Coast, so
West Coast, stand up. Let's go.
That's right. Come on, put your hands up.
Hey, real quick, funny story, Trey. I remember when we first launched it, and I shared this on my Facebook page. One of my friends had actually said, "Hey, man, how does Texas fit into the whole East-West football network?" And I was like, "It's in the middle."
There you go. It's the dash between East and West.
Well said. I'm going to use that going forward. Thank you, buddy.
You got it, man.
Well, Trey, we appreciate your time and joining us on the podcast today. I want to start off by talking about the NFL playoffs. So it's been a crazy season in the NFL. One additional playoff seed in each conference. I just want to get your thoughts on the teams that we have in the playoffs.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because we've had now 7 straight Super Bowls and 14 straight Super Bowl teams that have had the bye. You've either had a 1 or a 2, starting in Super Bowl 48. And there's only one team that gets the bye now, which is the number 1 seed, and that would be the Chiefs and the Packers. So current history would tell us that the most likely scenario is a Chiefs-Packers Super Bowl, which, would be great. It would be a rematch of the first Super Bowl, and you have arguably the best quarterback playing right now in Aaron Rodgers against the guy who could be the next, or I think will be the greatest quarterback of all time when it's all said and done, in Patrick Mahomes. But there's a couple of outliers there. The Brady-led Bucs offense has been sort of up and down the entire season. But the last 3 weeks, they have been on fire. And Brady, for most of this season, has been one of the worst quarterbacks in terms of completions and accuracy in throws of 20 air yards or more. In the last 3 weeks, it's been incredible. Now, granted, one of them was against the Lions team that clearly was not interested in full participation, for lack of a better term. But he's played great. And then you have the Buffalo Bills now as the 2 seed. And I'm just going to throw it out there. They have scored 142 points, 142 points in their last 3 games. There is not a team playing better and more dominant football heading into the postseason than the Buffalo Bills. Now, you could say, okay, one of those games was against the Broncos where they didn't have any defensive backs. Absolutely fair. The other one was against a depleted Patriots team who realized they were out of the postseason for the first time since 2008. And didn't win 10 games in the season for the first time since 2002. I get that. The last game of the season was against a Miami team with a really good defense that had a win and get in scenario, and they put a 50 burger on them. And it was such a dominant performance. They pulled most of their starters at halftime. I still believe the Kansas City Chiefs are the team to beat in the NFL. And I think for lack of a better term, they've played with their food most of this season. They get up on teams, have big leads, let them come back and find a way to win the game. They won 6 straight games by 6 points or less. That has never happened in NFL history before. But that can bite you in the ass in the playoffs if you're not playing well. I still think they're the best team because they know what it takes and they're trying to do something which is so hard to do. Repeat. We haven't had one since Super Bowl 38 and 39 with the Patriots. But I would be very wary if I was Kansas City of Buffalo. And if I'm Green Bay, they went down to Tampa Bay and got their butts whipped earlier this season. Now that game would be at Lambeau, which would make it different. But Tom Brady, I don't know if you've heard, he's pretty good in the postseason.
Yes, he is. What team do you think can make a playoff run that not a lot of people are expecting? I know last year we saw the Tennessee Titans make it all the way to the AFC Championship game behind that running game. What team this year do you think has a chance to do that?
It's interesting, and this is going to sound crazy, but you go through the situation. Let's start with, say, Cleveland. They're obviously dealing with a massive COVID issue. You're going to have your head coach not be able to coach the team in the postseason, which is like the most peak 2020 football season experience ever with everything that's going on. You mentioned Tennessee. Well, their defense has been a real problem all year. I saw it. Can we trust them to come out of somewhere? Maybe. Indianapolis has been really up and down. Maybe. This is going to sound crazy, and I don't think it's going to happen, but if you're asking me, a team with a puncher's chance, right? The teams that I think have a puncher's chance, this is going to sound ridiculous, but like, if Trubisky plays the way he's played down the stretch, and that defense is as good as we know it is, okay, miracle scenarios, sure, I could see them maybe surprising some people. The other one, you're going to laugh, but we have the Washington football team heading in there and going out of Tampa with a defense that is playing as well as any defense in football right now. As long as Alex Smith is healthy, with that defense, I give him a puncher's chance. I don't expect it to happen, but would it shock me? We've had 2 other instances where we've had a team under 500 win a division. It was the Seahawks, and that was the Beastquake game against the Saints when they were defending Super Bowl champs. They won that game. And then we had the Carolina Panthers in 2014 or 2013 that won 7-8-1 and beat the Cardinals. Now, to be fair, that Cardinals team was without Carson Palmer, their quarterback, who got hurt. It was a backup quarterback in Drew Stanton. Obviously a much different scenario with Tom Brady. But if you're asking me for someone with a wild swing at it, those are the first 2 teams that come to mind.
Wow.
Great answers. Yeah, actually, I've heard Chicago a couple times this week about, if this team, if Mitch doesn't turn the ball over and just plays the way he's been playing, that they have a chance to beat the Saints at home. And
and the Saints are, look, Drew Brees is not right. We all know that. He looked a little better against Carolina, but you don't just recover from 11 fractured ribs in 3 weeks. It just doesn't happen that way. And he, even before Drew got hurt, his accuracy was an issue this year. Now they hopefully get Mike Thomas back, who missed the last couple of games of the regular season and missed most of the regular season. Yeah. But, that offense has not been in rhythm outside of Alvin Kamara for the entire season. So, stranger things have certainly happened. Sure. And I'm really curious. Like my preseason pick was the Chiefs over the Saints, because I believe this season, in all its weirdness, would favor teams that had stability at the coaching position, stability at the quarterback position, and a veteran team that knew each other pretty well. I think I would, if you gave me a mulligan, I would certainly put the Packers in there right now. But at this point, I'll stick with it because it's still alive, and I would look great if it happens.
Thanks, Trey.
Going on, Trey. At first, I want to thank you for joining us today, man.
No, thanks for reaching out, man. I appreciate it. So happy to do so.
Sir, first, I want to ask you, what has it been like since you left NFL Live? Like, what you missed the most about NFL
Live? It's interesting. Obviously, I have a lot of friends that I was with for a lot of years there. Mark Schlereth was one, Teddy Bruschi was one, Herm Edwards was one, Ryan Clark was one, Damian Woody, Tim Hasselbeck, all those guys. That's what I miss. I miss, like, the reason we launched our podcast now, Half Forgotten History, check it out on YouTube and Spotify and Apple and all those Stitcher and all those places you can get podcasts, is because some of the greatest conversations I had with those guys and the guests we had on the show never made it onto the show. Like, we would talk about it in the green room, or we'd go out somewhere, but when you could go out somewhere at the Super Bowl at dinner and have a cocktail, and they would tell me these great stories that never made air. And I'm like, man, we got to get these stories out. We got to get these stories out somewhere. So that's what I miss more than anything else. I miss the time that I had all those years with people that were not just coworkers, right? There's 3 kinds of people you work with in a company. There are people that are your coworkers, there are people that are your friends, and there are people that are your boys. And those guys were my boys. I mean, like Herm Edwards and I can't tell you all the trips Herm and I made everywhere. And when he left to go to Arizona State, first of all, I was so happy for him. But there was a hole in my heart when Herm left. And then, the year before, Mark left to go do stuff for Fox. So that was hard. And that's what I miss. I miss, like, Herm and I would always go somewhere, and he called me his road dog, because he'd come up here, because he lived on the West Coast, and he'd come up here and do something. He's like, Rody, where are we going out today? And we'd always go somewhere and go play golf or do something. And he looked at me and he'd say, Rody, when we're having a good day, he'd say, Rody, someone had to be us today. Might as well be us. And that was sort of the nature of our friendship. And it's kept up, even though he's now at Arizona State. I still go out and see him when I can. But honestly, what I miss more than anything is that time with guys that were not just coworkers or friends, but dear, dear friends of mine that you worked with sometimes 3, 4, 5 days a week for 15 years.
Yes, that's very good there. And I remember every year in April when it's time for the draft, and you did a tremendous job covering the draft, and especially this past year But you know, with
Yeah.
everything that was going on, I think that's probably one of your best. You've had a bunch of them. All of them were great, but I think this past one with the current state of the world at that time, I think it was great. I think you nailed the draft. So I want to wish you good luck on that. You did very well with the draft every year.
Well, I appreciate that. And it was interesting, right? Because I think the draft came along when nothing was happening and we're all sort of dealing with the reality of, holy crap, everything is shut down. You know, the NBA canceled the season, then the NHL canceled the season, then Major League Baseball was put on hold, not canceled, postponed. And then the NCAA tournament stopped. And that was all within a matter of 48 hours. So then we were left with this void. And free agency went on in the NFL, but literally nothing was going on. I mean, we were replaying stuff on ESPN at that point, Monday Night Football games from 2008, 2009, whatever. Now, part of that was fun. You got to see a bunch of old stuff that you remembered.
Oh, yeah.
But the draft at that time, it was sort of like a release point for so many people because the COVID thing was, we were just understanding how devastating it was. And it was like, oh, thank God, a live sporting event. And it felt cathartic. The best way to describe it to a lot of people is like, hey, this thing is happening. We found a way to make it work. And just so people get an understanding, 53 days before the draft, we had everything set up in Las Vegas. We had this incredible remote stage. We had this incredible layout. All this was going to happen. And it came to a crashing halt. And within 50 plus days, everyone behind the scenes at ESPN and NFL Network, because we all were one team this year because of the COVID thing, pulled this off. And it was a remarkable achievement. And it wasn't just me. It was the directors. It was the producers. It was the field producers that were able to pull this thing off with so many remotes. It was a marvel of collective teamwork and technology, because if this had happened 2 years ago, probably wouldn't have been able to do it. Because technology is where it is today, we were able to pull something off that I don't think anyone thought was actually possible. And I am immensely proud of you saying that, because not only what it meant for what I was able to do, but all those people that nobody knows, the research department, the Vince Masseys, the Evan Kaplans, all these people that I worked with for so many years at ESPN that helped me along the way. Nobody knows their names. The Brian Ryders, the producers, the Jeff Nelsons, the directors, the Rob Adamskis, the Seth Markmans of the world, who behind the scenes, runs all our NFL stuff at ESPN. They were all, Jim Carr, who does amazing research work for us on the draft. They were able to pull this off. And, I had the easy part. I was out there doing what I would normally do. I was on camera on a set talking to people. They were behind the scenes in a building in Bristol or somewhere out with some of those kids wearing masks the entire time and still managing to pull it off. So the way I looked at it, I had the easiest of all of those things. And what those guys did was absolutely remarkable.
I appreciate it, Trey. Well said.
Thank you, sir.
Hey Trey, it's Jerry again. So are you going to be a spectator this year for the draft? I mean, we need to hear you in some form or fashion for the upcoming, or for all the drafts upcoming.
Yeah. Well, I promise I will be a spectator, but I will be more than a spectator. I can't say definitively where I will not be a spectator, but I can promise you I will not be a spectator. That's the best way I can say it at this point.
Awesome. That's good to hear, man, because I'll tell you this.
I appreciate that.
That 2021 NFL draft is going to, it's already making a lot of noise, of obviously because of the quarterbacks that are coming into this draft class, right? But I don't think I would want to envision not hearing you announcing the names or being a part of it in some capacity.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, let's move along, right? So let me ask you a couple personal questions, I guess, right? I guess if you can, right? Who are 3 people who have been the most influential to you
in terms of the profession?
Yeah, profession or your family. If you.
Well, I would have to say, let me just start with my dad, and for reasons that you guys probably don't know, my father was a journalist, a print journalist. He grew up in Texas, in San Antonio. Shout out to close to where you are, just a little north of Harlingen.
Yes.
But he grew up in San Antonio and went back to, after he graduated from Baylor, in the 50s. He went to work for the old San Antonio Light newspaper at that time. And then he decided at that point, if I really want to get into journalism, I need to go to New York, because New York City was the epicenter of journalism. And now, of course, you can be wherever you want to be, wherever. But so he left my mom and my sister and took a train up to New York. Or maybe he drove up to New York. I don't remember. He might have driven up to New York, got a room at the YMCA in New York City. He had one name on a piece of paper at a place called the Time Life Building in New York, which is no longer the Time Life Building because time and life have sort of moved on and done different things. But it was the main hub right there on 6th Avenue, right across from Radio City Music Hall. He walked into the lobby and said, "Hey, I'm looking for so-and-so." And the receptionist said, "Oh, well, he's not here." And my dad was like, "Okay, thanks very much." And he started to walk out. And this woman, who he does not know who she is, said, "Wait a minute, are you looking for a job?" And he said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, that's not the person you need to talk to. You need to talk to this person." If that woman had not stopped my dad and said, "You're looking for the wrong person, you need to talk to somebody else," he might not have never gotten the job that he got, which was an in-house reporter for an in-house publication for the building. And 3 weeks after that, he got a reporter job for Life magazine.
Wow.
And then a year after that, they shipped him out to Los Angeles, where he was covering things on the West Coast for Life magazine. And then in the late 60s, they told my dad, "We need you to be the bureau chief for the Vietnam War." So we moved to Hong Kong for 3 years, and he covered the Vietnam War for Life magazine. And then we moved back to the States in the early 70s, and then Life magazine folded, and they kept my dad and two other editors, and they said, "We need you to come up with a new magazine for us." And they came up with something called People magazine. And it will go down as the most successful magazine launch in history, because nobody's launching magazines anymore. But it was a smashing success. And when I was a kid in elementary school and middle school, whenever he had a teacher in service day, I would go into New York with my dad and help him out, running copy or whatever. And I realized at that time that my dad had a cooler job than most of my friends. Like, they were bankers or lawyers or dentists or doctors, whatever. And I didn't know it at the time, but he was sort of teaching me how to do this stuff. And he was sort of telling me, "Hey, take this copy over here, talk to him about this," when I was 10 years old, and I thought the idea of him being able to tell stories was really cool. And it just planted a seed in my head that I would like to do something like my dad did. So I would have to start with my father in terms of that, just for that, and also just for being a great dad. As for other people that influenced me, there were several broadcasters that I really admired growing up and watched and thought, "Hey, I would like to do things the way they did them." One of them was Bob Costas, and who just was at NBC forever. And before I got to ESPN, I actually worked in St. Louis for 6 years. And Bob at that time was in St. Louis. And for whatever reason, he lived in St. Louis at the time. We just sort of hit it off. And I'll never forget, there were several times where I was a very young sportscaster. Bob Costas went out of his way and said, "Hey, I really liked what you did there," or, "that you did that right." And that meant the world to me. And like the first time I ever got on at ESPN in 1997, I was on the ESPN news shift, 2 to 4 in the afternoon on a Saturday, who's watching. I got a call from Bob and said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I watched your show and I thought you did a really good job. And this is what I liked." And I was like, that meant the world to me. First of all, what the hell is he watching on a Saturday afternoon when he has better things to do? But he would take the time not only to watch, but to reach out. So that Bob will always be someone for me that I really appreciate by not only the way he handled the business, but also the way he took the time to reach out to someone who he had no business, it wasn't going to help him in any way, shape, or form, but he did it. And when I was working in St. Louis for a local TV station, I was working for a guy named Mike Bush there, who's still there. And he taught me really how to be a reporter. It's one thing to be an anchor and read highlights and be funny and glib, but he taught me how to really be a reporter and say, "Look, find stories that are interesting and do these things." And I'll never admit this to his face because, he's a jerk. I'm kidding. But we have a love-hate relationship. But he really taught me that. Like, he really taught me how to go about digging for stories. And like one of the things that, because of what he did to me, taught me how to do things. The St. Louis Cardinals were sold by the brewery, the Anheuser-Busch brewery, Budweiser, in the 90s, which was a big bleeping deal in St. Louis. And we got the scoop before anybody else because of the way that Mike had sort of taught me to do these things. And Jack Buck at that time was still alive and doing very well. And he was the play-by-play voice for the Cardinals. And I was about to do a live shot from the brewery right before the big announcement, and we had beaten everybody on the story. And, you know, Jack Buck had this old gravelly voice. And I remember him sidling up. I didn't see him. I'm getting ready to do my live shot. I'm nervous. I have my camera and my microphone in front of my face. And Jack Buck sneaks up behind me and whispers into my ear, "Way to go, kid. You scooped them all." And that was cool. And if Mike hadn't taught me how to do that kind of stuff, that probably never would have happened.
Wow, man. I mean, this is stuff that we probably would never know about Trey Wingo right here. So thank you so much for sharing that, Trey.
Yeah, no worries. It was fun.
Yeah, that is fun. Let me okay, so help us out, right? So
Yeah.
put yourself in our shoes. Okay. So what would you have asked yourself that we did not?
That's a great question. You know, I don't know if I can answer that because at the end of the day, I'd have to do more research on the show and everything it's about. But look, I guess I would always want to know what you asked me. I thought was great because I think there's this feeling out there that if you see somebody on a certain place for a long time, that, oh, well, that's just where they've always been. And that's, you know, how it goes. It's never easy. Like my first job was in Binghamton, New York in 1988. I was a one-man bander on a local TV station that didn't have teleprompter. I had to shoot all my own video, edit all my own video,
Wow.
do all of that. And our studio had a tin roof. And whenever it rained, all you hear was, it was awful. You know, it was just terrible. But everybody goes through that stuff and everybody needs help from somebody. Like when I hear somebody say, "Oh, he's a self-made man," I'm like, that person doesn't exist. Now you can be determined and you can have the drive to succeed. But if someone doesn't reach down and give you a helping hand, you'll never get to where you want to go. And there are so many people that along my journey have reached out and lent me a helping hand that I want to make sure that I can do that to as many people as possible. Because, you know, there's Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, has a great line. You see everybody on the way up, on the way down, in the long slog to the middle. And, you know, just be nice to people. And if you can help them, because odds are at some point, the interns will be the presidents. You know, like one of my first jobs in TV, I was a page at NBC at 30 Rock in the building. It's like I gave guided tours of the building. I don't know if you ever watched the old 30 Rock show on NBC, but Kenneth, the guy in the blue blazer, that's what I did. You know, I gave guided tours of the building and you know, worked behind the scenes on Saturday Night Live and all this other stuff. And now I was able to do what I've done in my career. And one of the guys that I was an intern with, and you'll appreciate this coming from Harlingen, he's now the president of the Houston Rockets.
Oh, wow.
His name is Tad Brown. He's the CFO and the president of the Rockets. And, you know, we were interns pages together at NBC in New York in the late 80s, and things have worked out okay.
Well, thank you, Trey. I mean, you have me speechless here, man.
Don't ever be speechless in this business.
Oh,
Rule
yeah.
number one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Hey Trey, just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we can catch up with you soon.
Anytime, man. And check out Half Forgotten History on YouTube, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever. Shameless plug. You'll enjoy it.
Yes, make sure you guys check it out and also subscribe. Most important.
Boom.
Subscribe.
And the rating 5-star.
There you go.
Right. Thank you, Trey.